Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us. Today, as you hopefully know, we're going to be exploring how open data and OpenActive can help local authorities to improve health and well-being. Just a little bit of housekeeping, we are recording this webinar, but all questions will be submitted anonymously and things like that. So if we just start with some quick introductions. I'm Ellen, I work at the Open Data Institute, which is one of the stewards of the OpenActive initiative, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit more detail after this. And I'm really excited to welcome two speakers. We've got Anne-Marie from MCRActive and Eugene Minogue from Active Westminster, and they'll be sharing some of the really exciting work that they've been doing to pioneer OpenActive. And we want this to be a really interactive session, so here's just the agenda. We'll spend about half the time with a very brief introduction to OpenActive, then we'll hear from Anne-Marie and Eugene, and then we've left a lot of time for Q&A, hopefully get some discussions going, understand what challenges you're facing, what areas you're interested in. And yeah, we really hope this kind of webinar can be the starting point to working with a lot of you a lot more closely and starting some new conversations. So to run the Q&A, as I said, we're going to be using Slido. If you haven't used it before, it's pretty easy to use. If you just go to slido.com and search OpenActive, that's the event code. And just to get us started, to make sure everyone can access it, we've got a poll. So if you can start submitting your responses there. Great. Yeah, so you can see how to join at the side, slido.com, OpenActive, or if you've got your mobile, you can use the QR code. Just give you 30 seconds for people to share their answers and yeah, help us know who we're talking to. And also, cool, that's okay. So if we actually have 100 people on this call, which is quite exciting. Give you a couple more seconds to make sure that everyone is familiar with it. Cool, so it's good to see that quite a lot of you do work for local authorities, as that is mainly what we're going to be focusing on. Oh, I just skipped forward. So here's the second poll. So yeah, the next one is, how familiar are you with OpenActive? So again, let's just give us a sense of who we're talking to. If anyone's just joined late, we're just demonstrating slido.com, which is how we're managing the Q&A session that will come at the end. So if you go to slido.com, search OpenActive, then you should see where you can submit questions, submit answers to polls. So again, I've got just over half of respondents. Interesting mix of level of familiarity. Give it another 20 seconds. If anyone's having any issues, either to do with the Zoom or Slido, just put them in the chat to the panelists and we can answer them. But it looks like most of you getting the hang of Slido. Cool, okay. And then final bit of Slido for now is, this is an open text question. So it's be interesting for us to know a little bit more about what challenges you're currently facing and trying to increase participation in sport and physical activity. These can be pandemic related and from before the pandemic. And yeah, so if anyone wants to share some thoughts. As I said at the beginning, we're quite keen for this to be an interactive session as possible. Want to hear a lot from you as much as we're hearing from the speakers. Cool, getting accurate opportunity data and just reaching people who are completely inactive. Yeah, budgets, that's a big one. Cool. Just seen a question on the chat, and yes, we can share the polls and the answers in the follow-up to the webinar, so I'll make a note to do that. Cool, getting lots of different responses, some common themes, reach, targeting, engagement scale. Hopefully, Anne-Marie and Eugene, you're seeing these and it's giving you some ideas about what to talk about on top of what you've already prepared. Still, yeah, no one for answer, that's true. Great. Okay, so we've got 32 responses. So that's a lot to get started with. Oh, still a couple coming in. Taking rest, that was an interesting one. Okay. Well, it's a lot to get started with. We're conscious of time, so I'll move on. But as I said, we've got a lot of time at the end for Q&A, so we can pick up some of these themes then. Okay. So I'm just going to give a very brief headline introduction to OpenActive. So Sport England has funded OpenActive since 2016, and it's largely trying to tackle this problem that research shows that difficulty in finding and booking activities online is one barrier to people getting active. So what we're trying to do is make it easier for people to find and book activities online by making it easier to publish, share, and use data about those activities, so about opportunities to get active. And the way OpenActive is structured to do that is, firstly, it's always important to flag OpenActive is not one big national activity finder. Get that question a lot. But we create data standards and tools, and these standards provide an agreed standardized format for publishing, using, and sharing data so that it's easier for people to know what activities are going on where, and this data can fuel all kinds of new digital products and services. We also produce tools. For example, we've got a thing called a validator, which can help test the quality of the data. And we have things like e-learning guides to encourage digital literacy in the sector. OpenActive is a community-led initiative. That's really important. So as I said, Sport England fund OpenActive, and the Open Data Institute, where I work, is a steward alongside UKActive. And so while these three organisations oversee the governance and strategy, all our decisions and the direction of the initiative is guided by the community and what they need and want. And by community, I mean the whole sports and physical activity sector. So that's from local authorities to technology startups to independent coaches running their own sessions. And finally, we're trying to build a wealth of case studies and research around how open data can help people to get more active. So where it works, where it doesn't, and things like that. And just the final point I'm going to say is that while on our website we do say we're focused on making it as easy to find and book a tennis court as it is to book a hotel room, and that is a really important element of it, is meeting consumers' needs around digital convenience. There's also a lot of other areas and a lot of other potential for OpenActive, for example, social prescribing or improving accessibility information in the sector. So when you're thinking about the challenges you're facing and how open data or OpenActive could solve them, I just really encourage you to think big.
So I'm Eugene Minogue. I am Head of Physical Activity, Leisure and Sport, or PALS for short, at Westminster City Council. Our external facing brand is Active Westminster. I've got about 10 minutes to try and rattle through a bit of the potted history of how we've got to where we've got, some of the learnings and the journey that we've taken with that. And I'm most excited today to do my Chris Whitty. So next slide, please. There we go. So we're just going to start with a quick video from my friend Bourne, which will answer most of the FAQs around open data and OpenActive. I use this quite a lot just to break the ice and just to answer some of the frequent questions that are out there. It's a very fun video. So over to Bourne. There we go. We can hear from Bourne.
About open data. hackers are coming! The hackers are coming! Now that's the common response. We're gonna steal my passwords, my money, my photos. And there's always one guy that's like, yeah, about this open data thing, man. Yeah, G. Yeah, if I use private mode on my PC, can I still hack it? I send my browsing history to my missus. Yeah, G. Okay. Let's clarify what open data is. And I hope they can't actually do that. Yeah, G. So the idea of open data is some data, not personal data, should be freely available for everyone to use, like class listing and booking information. To do this, we open an API. That means nothing to me. I'm not gonna sign manual, but send me your bank details so I can donate to your favorite charity. So what is an open API? Well, think about it like this. You book a flight, a hotel, a hire car through one booking agent. That booking agent then somehow magically gets you booked on 3 different service providers' booking systems. And this is done through an API. So websites such as Get Active London can list all the activities in London. And the exciting thing is, we don't have to send them a PDF because it's pulled through an open API. By opening your API, you're strengthening sport as a sector and getting more people who aren't doing activity because they simply cannot find it and get frustrated and spend their time and money in other sectors. Let's go on holiday. So it's pretty obvious. Let's start to work together as a sector and stop competing against each other and start competing against other sectors and focus on getting more people moving. My name's Bourne. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, share it, tell your friends, kiss your dog, and let's get more people moving. Bye.
There we go. You heard it from Bourne yourself. Kiss your dog and let's get moving. So a bit of potted history in terms of Westminster. I was seconded over to Sport England in 2015, sort of 16. Had sort of the inside track of the work around OpenActive and other bits and pieces. For my sins, when I came back to my substantive post at Westminster, they asked me to rewrite the strategy. And one of the things that we embedded within the strategy was the requirements around open data and how we was going to do that. And that was really the bedrock of our digital transformation, which I'll explain a little bit more as we sort of go through. So several sort of key things. Those of you that work in local authorities, there is a lot of process to go through. There's lots of questions that get asked, lots of colleagues that you've got to work with in various different departments and others. So it isn't just a service-driven bit. This is a council-wide sort of approach in terms of doing that. So one of the things that we did from the very early outset was set out our stall in terms of that, really bringing members on the journey in terms of what it means to implement OpenActive and how that would digitally transform not just our services, but other services in and around that. And that's really kickstarted a number of things, which I'll come on to shortly. So there's a number of things that we did. There was a lot of storytelling in the background, so we had to get members up to speed, where it sat, where this came from, what was it. We're quite fortunate in Westminster, some of our members are very tech savvy or run their own tech businesses, so it's pushing on an open door in terms of getting them to understand what it was. But equally, there were still challenges in terms of doing that, so we had to align it with the strategic view of the council and what was going on elsewhere across the council in terms of digital programs and the smart city agenda, which I'll come on to in a little bit. So we got it in our active Westminster strategy, which is the council's physical activity, leisure and sport strategy that was published in 2018. We had a lot of scrutiny and other bits sort of leading up to the publication of that. Those of you that are that way minded, please go and download a copy and have a look. It is quite a light but also interesting read. I would say that I'm a bit biased because I predominantly wrote it, but it is in there. And off the back of that, shortly after the publication of our strategy, the then Minister for Sport, Tracy Kraut, sort of wrote to the sector and sort of said, look, this is out there. Why is nobody using it? You know, get your act together and implement it. And we sort of stuck a hand in the air and gave the DCMS a little wave and said, you know, we're doing some good work here. It's not perfect, it's not polished, but we're trying. We're open in terms of trying new things and testing things in a very different and innovative sort of way. And that really put it on a political map for us. And you know, we got really strong buy-in from our members, and that's where it really took off. We signed the Active Digital Pledge from Sport England, and then began some really interesting work with our partners, I'm In and Playways, in terms of implementing that. the main thing that we wanted to do was to get an activity finder up and running, exactly for what Bourne's outlined on the email there. We've got a very mixed economy of providers in Westminster. Obviously, we've got our own leisure contractor. In terms of doing that, we run 7 leisure centres and various community facilities across the city. We've got circa 300 odd partners across the city as well that work with us across the piece. So bringing all of those on that journey, you can't do it from day one. It takes time. You've got to convince people and bring them on that journey with you. So we've been working very hard on that with our partners and continue to do it. So when we launched a beta website in 18. It's still, as you can see on screen now, forgot to do my next slide, please, but we are in the right place now. So it sort of shows you where we're at now. So with the activity finders on there, and that went live in March 18 to coincide with the new strategy. And then we started getting glitches and other bits and pieces that weren't working, not mainly to do with the activity finders, just the website, and sort of coming out of the corporate environment was a challenge. So we've had that on there, and then by the time we got into the rhythm of getting the data working, obviously COVID hit, but we was in a very strong position in terms of that, because we had strong sort of affinity with our activity finder, with our residents and our customers, and then we pivoted that very, very quickly from in-person or physical activities to online stuff and making stuff available, not just locally, but also nationally as well. There's national providers out there as well that were making content available. Joe Wicks is a sort of one example. Our Parks, obviously national. We was even showcasing stuff that was going on in Brum and other parts of the UK as well. Because it's digital, people can participate in it. So it gave people lots of choice. So we've been in a really strong position in terms of that. The irony was last summer we was actually giving up to turn on what's called book and pay functionality. So we had the find, you could find the activities, you could tune in, but for the in-person activities, it was making sure that people could find, book and pay in terms of that. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Ellen, I think you're driving on this one, yeah. Obviously, this is mimicked on our app as well. So the app was updated to include the activity finder as well, which is provided by Playways. And that provides a native sort of app for iOS and Android, and includes the activity finder as well in terms of doing that. So that's sort of where we got to in terms of when sort of COVID hit. And we've had lots and lots of success, but equally there's been lots and lots of teething problems and pulling teeth in terms of that. It's a very complex environment for those of you that work in local authorities. We've obviously got the leisure contractor, we've got third-party sort of organisations that run community use facilities, we've got private providers, we've got your one-man bands, and everything in between to sort of try and bring people on board. We're getting there. We're not quite there yet, and obviously COVID has slowed things down in certain places, but it has accelerated it quite significantly in others. So just a few quick stats. Since April last year, we've had over 25,000 searches on the activity finder, so around about 200,000 a month or 70 per day. Sort of going through that, so we know it is still being used for people to find and participate in activities. And also we've been working with our leisure contractor to make sure that we pivoted with them and their online offering to make sure it was within the activity finder. That wasn't just for us, that was also with Sport England. So those of you that are aware, Sport England launched an activity finder this year. So our data, what we was doing locally with our leisure contractor, was very significant to Sport England. So Everyone Active's sort of weekly free online classes were viewed or searched over 100,000 times on the Sport England website. So it goes to show what we're doing locally was also assisting nationally and much further. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of embedding OpenActive, while all that's been going on, we've been doing lots in the background. So the obvious one is around making it a requirement of our leisure contract. Our leisure contract was relet in 16. Obviously, this OpenActive wasn't as well developed or mature as it is now. So we've now done a variation of contract with the contractor to embed the requirements of OpenActive. And then we've taken it much broader than that. So it's a standard requirement now in virtually all agreements or contracts that we use. So things like community use agreements, service level agreements, funding agreements, and even very specific programs. We have a program called Park Makers, which is around the free use of parks and open spaces for private providers, PTs and others. So if they are using our parks and open spaces, we don't charge a license fee, but we ask them to provide activities in lieu in terms of doing that. But one of the requirements of the Park Maker scheme is to make sure both they're paid for and their free activities are on the activity finder. So we've embedded that in. Also our Active Westminster Mark, which is our local version of Club Mark, has it in as a requirement in there as well. And we work with Playways to onboard providers as well to make it easy for them to engage with OpenActive. Other things that we've done quite innovatively, we've worked very closely with our Family Information Service, particularly on the SEND offering. The irony was they're already using a form of open data, formerly known as Open Objects, to advertise various activities for children and young people in Westminster. We often got asked, as Bourne said in the video, for the PDF or the Excel sheet or whatever it was. So we stopped that, and one of the things that we did, we've now worked with the provider of that, iDocs, and our partners IMIN, and we've now got a UAT program undergo to sort of join those two data sets together, so that ours gets pushed to theirs and vice versa. And that's just gone live. Yes, there are some teething issues, but we will get there in terms of doing that. So even internally, it's starting to show some benefits in terms of doing that. So a few other key things I wanted to feed out around embedding OpenActive. So next slide, please. So our Active Westminster card, I'm sure local authorities all have something similar to this. It's based on proportionate universalism. That means that we have a universal offer across the piece, but we provide the biggest uplift to those based on the support that they need, particularly. So within the Active Westminster card, we've got various different categories that provide all sorts of levels of support, from free gym membership right through to discounted activities, free swim, other bits and pieces with it. The reason I'm highlighting this is because one of the things that our local authority is doing as part of the bigger digital transformation of the council is to introduce what's called the My Westminster account, or a single sign-on process, so that when people sign up, they don't sign up in silos. So they don't sign up for a library card, they don't sign up for an Active Westminster card, they don't sign up for a CitySave card. They take out one account with the council, and then that is their portal into the council, whether it's their interaction around bins, council tax, or around their discounts at our facilities and our partner facilities with that. So before we turn on Book and Pay, which we was giving out for last year, we've delayed that now to tie in with single sign-on. The reason we've done that is so that when people sign in, the price that they see is the price that they pay. So if I'm a resident and I'm a concessionary resident, it means that the price that I'm showing is my price after my discount has been applied. In terms of doing that, it makes the user journey much more simpler. It makes it more attractive and more likely for them to go all the way through. And that takes an awful lot of technical gubbins to sort of bring together. And we've been working on that for around about 18 months, and we're just about to do some MVP sort of programs. So we've got a small cohort of people to test that for us. So next slide, please. City for All, this is really fresh in terms of that. It only got launched by our leader last week. So very, very new. This is the council's overall strategy in terms of that. So it's the leader's sort of commitment for 21-22. We've had City for All, versions of City for All for the last couple of years. This is the newest one within it. It's got 4 themes within it. So bottom right, you can see Smart City. So this fits within that. And if you click on the next slide, please, we've now got it in that document. It is highlighted at the very highest level, the council strategy that we are proud early adopters of OpenActive. It's been hard work getting that there, but that commitment then gives us an awful lot of internal leverage. So when we get if, buts and maybes from colleagues in IT or elsewhere in the council, it allows us to sort of use that as significant leverage to say, look, this is one of the leaders' sort of commitments. This is at the highest sort of level. To get there, it's taken time. It's taken storytelling. It's taken convincing in terms of doing that, and also lots of prototyping. I don't like to use the term piloting, but prototyping is something that we get to, because we have failed, and we failed in many places, and we haven't got it quite right in other bits and pieces, and that's totally fine. And that's part of the supportive environment that we've got from members. Other places that it sort of features in, I won't bore people too much longer, but also the council's city plan, which is our local planning documents, it is also featured within there as well. So within the requirements of our built facilities strategy and our playing pit strategy also requires, where new facilities are developed or new providers come into the city, that these are baked in from the very outset. So yeah, that's sort of our journey in terms of that, and we've still got a long way to go. It's still not polished, it's still not as refined as we'd like it to be, but we are continuing to work on it. And one of the things we've been brave enough to do is to continue that beta mode. We want users and customers' feedback, good, bad, and indifferent, because that is the richest form of feedback, and it will enable us to reposition things and constantly reposition things to make sure it meets users' needs and also the requirements and the strategic objectives of the council.
Great, thank you so much, Eugene. Anne-Marie, you're back.
I'm Errock. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the digital strategic lead for MCRActive up here in Manchester. And I'll be following on nicely from Eugene, because it seems to be that we're their north counterpart in terms of what they're trying to achieve down in Westminster is what equally we're trying to achieve up here in Manchester. I'm not going to bore you with the details of why we have started the digital transformation project up here in Manchester. I think Eugene has alluded to it, and Sport England have done it. But one of the key things that we found out from our own public consultation was, again, that residents found it difficult to find activity and book it easily within their own communities. And that kind of started the whole journey for us here in Manchester around the digital project that we are currently in the middle of and coming towards the end of phase 1. Like Eugene, OpenActive and open data is a huge part of that. We use open data in 2 strands of the project that we've got. So obviously, like Westminster, we have created an MCRActive digital platform that is harnessing all the different opportunities that are available in Manchester to one single location for a resident to be able to find and book that activity. We're doing it through, obviously, the open data that's available to us. So again, we're working with our leisure operators here in the city. We get to work with 2 leisure operators, yay for me. So we have GLL and Everyone Active as our 2 leisure operators in Manchester. And both of them are obviously committed to open data and are well along that journey of making sure all of their opportunities are available through open data APIs. And we are on the process of the open booking being available by the summer of this year as well. Like Eugene, it's been a long and difficult road, and that's not because of anyone not wanting it to happen. It's just the complexity of what's required around the open data and the opportunities and the integration, and ensuring that the quality is right, and getting everybody on that journey of understanding of why it's so necessary to ensure that the quality is so high. We also use open data in our data hub. So like all of our opportunities were sat in silos, all of our participation data was sat in silos. So like the Westminster Active Westminster card, we have the MCRActive Pay and Play membership in the city. And the whole idea there is all that participation data is going to go into one centralized data repository, which we would then can overlay open data sets. So whether that's health statistics, census statistics, travel statistics. So for us, the use of open data in 2 mechanisms is quite heavily focused in the project. For in terms of going back though, for the purposes of this presentation, we are talking about the opportunities. So for us, we tackled it in Manchester in 2 ways. One is obviously working like Eugene has with our key partners who have either started the open data journey or have not been aware of it. So we've embedded that open data compliancy is also a prerequisite now for any of our contractors coming into the city to provide opportunities or run one of our facilities. We're also working with our partners who have their own robust websites and would like to open their data. And on the other side of that, we've built something called the provider portal, which is a mechanism for us to not only have quality assurance associated to any providers that we are recommending, on our site, but it also will facilitate your local yoga instructor who has no means to put their sessions onto a digital platform and make it open data. They can do that through the provider portal, put it onto our site, and then obviously, like Westminster supporting Sport England and public health, all of that data is open data compliant and can be pulled onto other sites, whether they're national, Greater Manchester, Northwest, whatever that is. Another thing with the quality assurance is, like these guys, we have the MCRActive mark, and that is then applied to, it's more of a quality assurance mark than really the open data compliancy. But I think that's one of the key differences that I have found through, if when we compare the sport and leisure open data agenda to the likes of Trivago and Uber Eats, is that for us, we feel that there's this like duty of care from the Manchester City Council, that when we're signposting, and particularly kids, young people, vulnerable adults, to activities, that we need to have some sort of quality assurance associated to those for a parent to make an informed decision. And I don't think that kind of overlays into the other sectors that we kind of always draw comparisons against. And I think that that's probably been one of the barriers for me, in terms of there's more and more open data streams are coming online, but it's where that data is coming from is one of the challenges that we face in allowing that to come onto our platform. And so it's just working through those challenges of how you can do that. Because for us, we started the journey saying that we would only want quality assured providers being advertised. And I think it's more a case of, how do you display that to the end user to make their own informed decision of whether we can't tell if that class is accurate, or if there's been safeguarding applied to it, we check that this person has a safeguarding qualification, a DBS, and they're definitely accurate because they're a provider online. So I think that we are learning as we go, as well as to which open data sets that we should turn on to the platform. But I think data quality is one of the things that we need to look at in this agenda. I do think that more and more people are buying into it and coming on and understanding the benefits of it now and starting that journey. But it's ensuring that when they say they're open data compliant, or they started, that the quality is there and the standardization is there for it. Next steps for us is obviously, and I'm sure Westminster will be the same, is we're all aware of the social prescribing agenda, and platforms like this is the answer, because your basic social prescribing is you need to become more active. Where does that frontline practitioner find that information? If we don't have these types of platforms that are pulling all of that information into one place, they don't have the time or the resource to individually sign up to different providers or find out what the price is of this, or is the eligibility correct. So for us, we're working quite closely with our health partners around ensuring that the platform is fit for purpose in that respect, in terms of the search activity finder is user friendly and is able to filter in the way that a frontline practitioner would expect it to do so. And then our next step with healthcare is around referral. So Eugene talked about the fact that the council are on our journey of change, and we are as well. We're actually just trying to get our own house in order in terms of from a sport and leisure service, because prior to this project that I'm on, you would have to sign up to do 2 different leisure operators just to go swimming in the city. Never mind if you wanted to then go to a school swimming pool or book a football pitch, you couldn't find out when they're free, how much they are, and then equally you'd have to be handing over your details a million times and have a million different memberships, ultimately for Manchester City Council. So again, we're on that journey of change of one sign up. So it's MCRActive membership, you sign up there and the relevant information is passed to those providers as and when required to facilitate whether it's booking or joining a club. And then we are on that journey of potentially a one sign up for the council, but for us our main focus is getting our own house in order, and then we can start to influence. Our next step would be leisure, our libraries, because they're our colleagues, and culture and museums are already around the table discussion. But for me, my main focus is, like I said, getting it that a resident can just sign up once to become active in the city, and that will do them. So in short, it's us in Westminster, we're on the very, very similar journeys. And I think what this should really show people who have obviously attending is that this is the direction of travel for the majority of local authorities. I'm sure Eugene's the same. I'm having more and more discussions with other core cities and other local authorities around what we're doing in Manchester. And there hasn't been one that hasn't said that it makes sense. And so I think for providers, for leisure operators, it's understanding that that is the direction of travel, that their customers will probably all come to the table in the next couple of years. So whilst there's maybe only kind of some of the key ones banging on the doors, demanding change at the minute, in the long run, people have got to be future proofing. And so get the hard work done now. And whether you're a booking platform or leisure operator, you will be in a much better position to win tenders. I know from our perspective, we are working with all of the greater Manchester boroughs around their leisure operating tenders and contracting arrangements. And as we put it into ours, that you had to be open data compliant and on the journey of open booking at the time, because this was a couple of years ago, so too will other leisure local authorities. Once I suppose that there's more case studies coming out of the likes of Manchester and Westminster around proof of concept, why it works, really good news stories, and I suppose the key learnings that we've learned through our journeys to date. So I think really, I'm just conscious, I didn't want to, obviously I went after Eugene, so I was like, I don't want to do the same stuff, because we are on very similar journeys. So I think, Ellen, for me, that's kind of given a glimpse into what we're doing in Manchester, but it is, I think, very similar to what Westminster aspirations are.
Great. No, it's still good to hear from both journeys, and I think that's a strong call to action. I think after those two really interesting talks, good to move swiftly on to Q&A. If I just get my slides in order. Yeah, that's just a reminder. Hopefully you're all familiar with it now. And so let me clear my screen. So if we go with the highest voted questions first, Anne-Marie, you already touched on this a little bit about what quality assurance checks are made. Could you expand on that?
So we have 3 marks within our on our platform. So when a resident sees an activity, there's an associated mark beside it. So we have our partner mark, our MCRActive mark, and our independent mark. And what they allude to is, and an independent provider is someone who has signed up via the provider portal to advertise their activities, events, or clubs. And depending on whether they deliver to young people, children, or vulnerable adults, or they deliver unstructured activity, will bring them through a different journey of checks. So obviously, if they're delivering to young people, DBS, safeguarding is part of that process. For an independent provider, they have to self-declare that they have all of these relevant qualifications or minimum requirements, and they will then have that independent mark. If they want to get the MCRActive mark, instead of self-certifying, they upload, and then that comes through to be checked, and there's timestamps associated to it. So say their public liability goes out of date, they get like a 3 to 1 month warning to re-upload it, or the mark is removed, or they are removed from the front-facing part of the website. And again, for any of our partner organizations, and by partners, that's anyone we have a formal relationship with, whether it's funding, equipment hire, whatever that is, they have to upload their documents via the portal. And then that's got like a designated officer on the other side. So we have a full audit trail of that. What we haven't built into is if someone doesn't self-declare, or if we have activities coming through open data streams that we don't have any quality assurance on the other side. So for example, we have England Netball. I've had conversations with them around the quality assurance they do before things are put onto their website. And we have made an agreement that they meet the same standards, so we can turn that API on and feature their activities. What we haven't alluded to is something like if NetMoms was to have activities on there and they were open data, there's nothing, I have no contact or relationship with NetMoms. So it's, do we promote those, but have something that flags up to a resident to say, there is no checks on this. But again, it's down to choice and informed decisions. So that's the next bit that I've got to look at. But for us, we've got different levels depending on the mark or who you're delivering to before you can be advertised on the site.
Great, thank you for sharing more. The next top voted is for you, Eugene. Does it have the facility to filter activities by those suitable for people who may have specific needs, e.g. dementia friendly?
In short, yes. iMint and Playways, we work with those to provide all sorts of different filters, and we've tried with all sorts of different ones. There is a delicate balance of providing too many filters in terms of doing that, but at the same time, yes, you want to, particularly those that have additional needs, making sure that those opportunities that are specific to them or more relevant to them are easily identifiable. In terms of that, but in short, yes, that you know, there's all sorts of filters that you can apply to your search. Very similar to how you book a holiday. You can click where you want to go or what you want to do. It's exactly the same with the activity finder.
Great, thank you. I think next question probably for both of you, but if Anne-Marie, if you'd like to go first. So what, how do we tell people about these digital activity finders, particularly in relation to disengaged, inactive people? How do you reach them?
So for us, we only launched our activity finder before Christmas. So we haven't actually done any huge marcoms around it because it launched, and the membership aren't launching to the summer because we wanted to bring that online with the booking functionality. So for us, we haven't done a huge amount, but we have already had commitment from our health colleagues in the Manchester Local Care Organisation that they have 3 staff workshops at the end of in the autumn year, where they have I think 1,000 at each of community practitioners who attend. So we're going to be presenting at those, and we're working with our social prescribing colleagues as well, and we're going to be setting up in-house training. So I think, as well as obviously a Marcoms plan that will come out in the summer around the city, we're going to be doing a lot of workshops and trying to piggyback on the back of already organised conferences, where I'll just speak and promote it via that way.
Great, thank you. Eugene, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I suppose from our side, we haven't done anything specific in terms of marketing the activity finder. It was launched in beta, and it was still very rough around the edges for a while, and we was tweaking that because the feed that actually hits our site is curated. So a bit like Manchester's, it is filtered out to make sure that only those with the active Westminster mark, or those that we have got an established relationship, or they're a national provider that we're aware of, gets onto the front of the page, or onto the page actually. So there's some bits with that. One of the things we did do when COVID did hit, we sort of went off the back of Sport England's Stay In Workout campaign, and I think that you have the leverage then of a national campaign, and then how you tailor that locally is key. And then some things that we've done, we've worked with local groups and providers to bring them on a journey, particularly OpenAge and Silver Fit and others that are in Westminster, particularly targeting older people around that, and then baking it into other programs as well that are out there. We need to make it visible in the first place so that people do it. It's the first thing that hits you in the face when you hit the Active Westminster website. It is basically the header and the banner that is on the website. There is a dedicated page for it, but that's the main thing there, and put it front and center. And we want to make it easy for people to use. We've baked it into the app and other bits and pieces. Of course, there needs to be sort of various sort of comms approach on it, both digital and traditional sort of ways of doing it, and we're dovetailing that to other digital programs that we're doing currently across the city. So things like the single sign-on, which I spoke about, but one of the other things we're looking at pioneering is smart activator screens in our parks and open spaces as well, so that people can interact with the screens there. That will be in part powered by the activity finder, amongst other pre-recorded sort of sessions and activities. As people will know, there's different demographics in each part of the UK. You're going to have to tailor your comms to be able to do that. But the main thing is making sure that it is visible and it is accessible.
Great, thank you. And then if we stay with Eugene, are you able to give a rough cost or estimate for how much the cost is of setting up data?
Yeah, so in terms of us, there isn't a sort of fixed cost. We've been on that journey, and sometimes when you're prototyping stuff, there's things that come up that you're not aware of because you're doing things pretty much for the first time in terms of doing that. And we've been on all sorts of journeys with it, both internally, externally with the leisure contractor, our partners, I'm in, and Playways, and others with it. I can't give people a definitive cost. It is expensive to do. I can say that because it takes, particularly from a local authority point of view, but we've now been so convincing in the argument that we've done, so much so that our standalone website is now being migrated back to the corporate site. And we're actually prototyping the whole rollout, or the initial rollout of the My Westminster account and a single sort of sign-on. So it demonstrates the commitment that we've now got. But getting there has been, you know, a 3-year journey above the line. So that's post strategy, but there's loads below the line that we had to do prior to even getting it into the strategy. So it takes a long time to sort of get there. And then also what we're doing with OpenActive is part of a wider digital transformation. So some of the stuff that Anne-Marie spoke about that they do up in Manchester and the work they do with 4Global, we're tying all of that in to the City Hub sort of platform so that we get better insights around what we do. One of the big key themes of the Active Westminster strategy is there's no KPIs, but we replace that with insight, impact and improvement. And insight is a key piece for us. We don't use the data we've got to help us inform that. And then when we implement programs like this, we've got to be acutely aware of what do we want to know and how does that help us shape the offering moving forwards, more importantly, and how do we continue that feedback loop constantly with it. So I'm sorry I can't give a pounds and pence answer. I sound like a politician now. Pounds and pence answer, but yes, it is part of a bigger program. That's how we've wrapped it up. But the expense, I suppose, comes from time probably and the journey, as opposed to what you need to procure.
Thanks, Eugene. Anne-Marie, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, Eugene pretty much summed it up. It's cost a lot of money, but I think that's because both of us have undergone bigger transformational change in the digital infrastructure of our cities, rather than OpenActive as one element of that. And it'd be hard to really silo it out.
Great, thank you. I think so. The next most popular question is: can you assess and evaluate the user data to see what activities have the most take up by demographic, and can you use this information to spot gaps in activity and reach? I'm aware that both of these platforms are quite newly launched, but is there anything you can say about that? Anne-Marie, I'll stay with you.
Yeah, so obviously our membership hasn't been turned on, isn't being turned on to this summer, but the infrastructure has been built behind us so that we will gather all of that data into that data hub that I mentioned that 4Global are created for us. So we will have a much more insightful and intelligent based platform to make those decisions for us of where our gaps in provision are, what's worked, what hasn't, and to start to understand the reasoning behind those. So whilst I can't say it's working now, it's totally been built to facilitate that once it goes live.
Great, thank you. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Eugene?
Yeah, I suppose from our side that's part of the rationale behind the single sign-on or the My Westminster account, is to make sure that we have that interaction, and that actually comes via it's with the council as opposed to the plethora of the different providers that are out there. It also allows us a much richer understanding of the interactions, particularly with residents across the piece as well. It allows us to match things like are they having similar issues in libraries, or you know, is a resident using just the leisure and not the libraries, or vice versa, whichever way it is round with it as well. But also the work that we do with our partners is making sure that we understand who's using what, where and when and how, so that we can tailor the offering, identify the gaps, and continue our journey around proportionate universalism to make sure that we're providing those that need the biggest uplift or the most support, that we do that in a way that is universal, but at the same time supports those that need it the most. And we have some examples of that, particularly with our corporate parenting board and the work that we do with children who are looked after by the council So we've got some rich data there, but that's because we've got that, and we need to expand that with it as we move forward. So it's pipelined. We're not there yet, but hopefully we will be.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've got time for one last question. So this is directed at Eugene. What was the deciding factor in getting the buy-in from your politicians on OpenActive?
I suppose the thing from our point of view was centering it on the story and looking at the intrinsic motivations as opposed to the extrinsic. The extrinsic plays a part. You know, what's the return on investment and other bits and pieces, but really tying it to the council's core values in terms of doing that. You know, we've got stubborn rates of obesity, stubborn rates of inactivity. The digital transformation is part of addressing that. It's not the panacea to it. But also then how it then plays into other commitments within the council, as you've seen, I've sort of shown today around the City for All and where that sort of fits in. That's taken, you know, a 3-year journey of storytelling and prototyping and failing in some places, but then also tying it up with other agendas in terms of doing that. And sometimes that means taking a couple of steps back and then sideways and migrating somewhere else. And that's been a prime example with the My Westminster account. That has not been a smooth journey, but where we've got to is really, really promising. And we're right at the forefront of that. We're sort of leading that with various sort of colleagues across the council. And it's but it's positioned within the wider digital transformation of the council. So I can't give, there isn't a one size fits all with that. I suppose the one thing that I would say, you've got to tell the story and you've got to get members to buy into it. And members have got to meet you halfway on the journey in terms of that. There's got to be, and we're very fortunate in Westminster to have that. We've got a very proactive sort of cabinet in terms of that, and they're very willing for things to be prototyped. In terms of doing that, and often that's where the richest learning is. Local authorities over the years have been, you know, you hold on to things until they're completely polished and you roll them out because you're fearful of getting complaints. But you want the feedback because that's where the richest learning is. It allows you to get that offer better and hopefully right in the longer term.
Thanks. Did you want to add anything, Anne-Marie, of your experience getting buy-in from politicians? Or
my buy-in came more because of the aspiration of what they wanted to achieve with the site, and the OpenActive agenda helped facilitate that. So it was actually an easy sell because there was no in order to achieve what we were looking to do, which is that one-stop shop for finding activity for residents. There was nothing else to kind of sell, so it was quite an easy buy-in for that agenda.
Great. Cool. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you again so much, Eugene and Anne-Marie. I hope everyone's found this interesting. We will share a recording of this. We'll collate the questions that we haven't had time to address and put them together in a FAQ document for you. And as I said at the beginning, I hope this is kind of the start of some conversations and work together. I think it's also important just to flag that, you know, Eugene and Anne-Marie have been pioneering a lot of this digital transformation work in their councils, and so really grateful that they took some time today to share their learnings and insights. Yeah, so thank you again, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Get out and enjoy some sun if you have sun like we do in the